Hello and welcome back to the Straight Line Path podcast. I'm joined here with my co-host Peter. Now, in this episode, we had an excellent chat with Will Sparks. Will is the founder of Sparks Wealth, a financial planning firm. He has studied in UCD, Trinity, and Cambridge University, and has a wealth of experience in wealth management, forgive the pun, working for the likes of Davies and Dolman Stockbrokers and Quilter.
Will shared his journey from becoming redundant in his first job to building his own company, Sparks Wealth. We talked about investing culture in Ireland and financial literacy. We also spoke about how the markets will always be uncertain and when best to invest. All of this and much more.
Hi, Will. Thanks for joining the Straight Line Path podcast.
Oh, cheers, Aaron. Cheers, Peter. Good to meet you both.
So I guess to kick things off, what is the role of a financial planner?
Oh, that's a good one to start. So I think simply put, a financial planner sits with a family, a business owner, a retiree, and helps them plan out, map out their next X amount of years in financial terms. And I think allows these people to, I suppose, obtain the softer goals in life whilst money is working away in the background. And I suppose that's how we try to do things in our place is, once you have a few sensible structures and sensible habits bubbling away in the background, you can take away that Irish guilt about spending and focus on experiences and doing good things with your money.
And had you always wanted to be a financial planner, or how did that come about?
No, definitely not. No, well, sorry. I certainly once I got into kind of finance, I knew that there's obviously different strands within economics and finance, and I certainly wanted to work with people and wanted to be around people and the energy of that brings. So I kind of knew that it was something on the client side. And so that led to initially what was probably a bit of an archaic term now, but just private clients, which was obviously focusing on families, but that was more sort of the wealth side of things, and then pivoted over to pure financial planning over sort of 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah. So what started that initial? What started that idea to then start your own business in financial planning?
So I was pretty happy where I was, to be honest. I was working for a larger corporate, doing something similar, managing equities for high net worths, so sort of investable assets of 250k plus or more, and I was enjoying it. I liked the buzz of working with people, all those kind of plus points that I laid on. One of the great things about many parts of financial planning and private clients is that even if you're not self-employed, it tends to operate as a business within a business. So if you're running a client book, if you're looking after clients, that's your sort of parish. That's who you look after, and ultimately, it fails or is successful based on your input. Obviously, that the institute is important to running parallel to you as well. So I was working, and I was quite happy there. And I think maybe sort of 2 or 3 years before I made the jump, I was coming up towards my 35th or 34th birthday, and kind of felt that if I was to do something by myself, it was about the right time to do it. Professionally speaking, I felt I had the requisite experience, maybe knowledge bank as well, and so it kind of felt right within that sort of sphere that it was maybe to start exploring what the opportunities might be to be self-employed. I also, I think, again, alongside that, I did feel that there was, I wouldn't say a gap in the market, but there was some really good advisors doing really interesting things who I'd interacted with and wanted to emulate. So I think a lot of pull factor mostly. Again, I was quite happy where I was, but I think with where the industry was going, having a business within a business was becoming increasingly difficult. And so that kind of, again, probably put me off a little bit and pushed me towards self-employment.
Okay. And what has been the biggest change since you've now become self-employed versus working in as a corporate?
Whew, It's a good question, Peter. I think like it's the consistent buzz in your mind that doesn't tend to switch off as much as you might do working for someone else. Obviously you're dedicated to your job, and you're definitely sometimes thinking about work outside of working hours when you're working for someone else. But it doesn't cease, the kind of that sort of worry and that kind of that sort of almost inner monologue that comes with being self-employed. I mean, you're always on. You can get things to a certain stage where it makes sense to go on holidays or whatever. But if certain calls come in or certain things arise, you have to jump at it, and you have to you have to always be kind of ready. So that's the deal you make. I would say on the plus side, having full creativity in your output and planning your days is something that I really, really like on the plus side. So not having to get, I suppose, approvals upon approvals to do certain initiatives or do things a certain way. And I think that kind of, for me and my business, it sort of manufactured its way through our marketing, which is I think a bit different to the rest of the industry, and probably just how we present to clients, which again I think is slightly different now. I appreciate everyone says that, but I do think we do things slightly different with a different tone of voice to conventional finance. So I think just that creativity piece is quite empowering.
Yeah, and you've been self-employed now for, what is it, 6 years?
Yeah, nearly 7, I think.
Wow. Okay. Oh yes,
like it feels like 2. It feels like 20 at times. So I don't know.
And I guess because you then started thinking about going out on your own in your 30s, but what was that kind of history? What was that kind of story beforehand? Because obviously, you're working in wealth management as well during the financial crash. Like, what was the story that essentially made you start your own thing and then be successful from there?
So I'd probably go a bit further back.
Yeah.
I was in college and had an opportunity to study abroad. Whilst I thought I wasn't in a language or anything, so I thought that kind of opportunity was maybe sort of unavailable. And I stumbled. I was walking in UCD one day, University College Dublin, and stumbled upon an opportunity, which was you could go to the States or Australia, and I was 19 or 20, and had lived at home for most of my life. So that was too much of a gift horse to not take up. So got accepted onto that and had a ball away for a year. Learned a lot about myself and how other people study and how other universities study, and I ended up in a reasonably academic residential college. And I couldn't believe that you'd have these first years that were studying after college in the evening time, like on a Wednesday evening. I was going like, well, this is so alien to me. So I borrowed a bit of that then when I returned home, and decided that right now is the time. I hadn't really done much academically, and decided that it was the time to kind of put the head down and try do something. Coupling that with I knew I'd always had certain issues with articulating myself on paper, albeit I could, talk for Ireland, but getting that onto paper was difficult. So I knew there was something up there. So I went through diagnostics, and a form of dyslexia came out, much to my surprise. And that, was it ground changing? Probably not. But at the same time, I understood my own aptitude more. I understood how to take exams better as a result. And between the two, between working ridiculously hard in that last year in college and understanding how I learned things better, managed to get a reasonably a very strong results out of university, which opened up a lot of opportunities for me, including, I suppose, one of them. So I went and did a master's in Trinity, and was sort of told, look, there's more possibilities to go abroad, the Harvards, the Cambridges of the world. So I ended up doing another master's in Cambridge, and that was kind of my 5-6 years of academia, which was more than enough. But I felt certainly in terms of achieving something. I felt like I kind of definitely ticked that box. And so then I arrived back. Fast forward, a lot of my class in Cambridge went down to London, and I decided I was a bit of a home bird, and I'd been away for the year, so ended up in Dublin. I wanted to go back to Dublin. There weren't many opportunities at that time in finance in Dublin, so I ended up on a graduate program for a company called Davy Stockbrokers, now owned by the Bank of Ireland, and landed on that. And like, just to paint the picture, I mean, this was 2006. Davy at the time had just bought themselves out of Bank of Ireland, and they're subsequently back in, and I think it was my second week, and this is like peak Celtic Tiger kind of euphoria. Second week, we all got, like everyone that wasn't an equity holder in the company got just a random check for 1,500 quid. In 2006. So I was just like, this is the best place ever, and what a time to be alive. And, there was that general kind of, everyone was making money, and so I wasn't making particularly good money myself at the time, but, 1,500 quid. So it was just a real bonus. And then obviously as things transpired, the economy started to go pear-shaped pretty quickly, the global financial crisis. And, I think that was all just accelerated in Ireland. So when that started to unravel, you could tell that things were different. And, so there was, a big redundancy announced. Me being a bit of a cocky sort of 22-year-old, full of my own importance. I mean, I went to Cambridge, for God's sake. They're not going to let go of me. So anyway, I went, got a tap on the shoulder by my boss at the time, who said, the MD wants to see you upstairs, which I kind of knew. Although a little bit of me, and this is how, I suppose, how unhumble I was at the time, was gone like, I think they're going to promote you. I really think they are. And so anyway, so your man grabs me, and we go down to reception. I'll never forget, I went down to reception in Davy House, and all the meeting rooms were taken. So like, he couldn't bring me into a meeting room to deliver the news. So we then went up to another meeting room floor. There was no meeting rooms. So we're in the lift again. We're both sort of twiddling our thumbs, and he goes, look, just so you know, it happened to me before, and it was the best thing to ever happen to me. And I'm kind of like, he's not talking about promotion. So I was like, I think it's a fun fact that I was pretty much sacked in a lift at the top of the Celtic Tiger. Or sorry, not the top, just as things were starting to go pear-shaped. So to be fair, they did it quite early, and they were, what other kind of semi-funny story, that there was, like, you go into this room and it was the HR lady and the sort of senior guys, and they kind of go, look, you're finished bottom of this matrix, which in my head I'm going, no, I didn't, but right, okay, whatever you think yourselves. But the good thing is we have a counsellor next door, in a meeting room next door, if you want to go in and have a chat. And like, I was sort of going, right, fine, counsel, right. And I just kind of went, whatever. Then a buddy of mine who was next in line had the same chat. And we were actually talking about this recently. And the HR lady goes, oh, look, you can see this counsellor next door. And he said at the top of his voice, because I could hear it at the other end of the corridor, he'd go, are you some sort of a mad woman? You've just let me go and you want me to go talk to a counsellor that you paid for. Good luck. So that was kind of that. And to be fair, kind of making light of it now, but I was pretty devastated at the time. It was it's a lot to take for someone who's young, keen, and probably a bit full of their own self-importance. So that was kind of
a program as well, was it?
Say it again, Aaron.
Was it a graduate program as well?
It was, yeah. And I think what had happened was I was doing all right on that, and then was sort of given a job outside of that. So technically speaking, I think it was pretty easy to get rid of me. So or at least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'd say the real story is like, your man's just a complete pain in the face. Let's get rid of him. But to be fair, there was a lot of good people lost their jobs at the time, and it was a tough, like, it was a really dark time to be kind of young and sort of keen, and a lot of friends lose their jobs over in London as well. But it was kind of, look, I think we were lucky insofar as around about my age, never got sucked into buying much property or anything like that, because we're probably too young for that. But certainly we would have hit that kind of first wave of 2008 sort of redundancies. So, sorry, Brice, I've gone off on a massive tangent here, but
No, it's good inspiration, I think, as somebody who's starting, their journey into the workforce, to see even if something can knock you down early on, you can get back up, and you're well equipped now, I think, for Black Swan events. You could say off the back of that, because I noticed as well when you started, so 2019, and 7 years ago, and then immediately the next year you're hit COVID. How was that for you? I'd imagine it could have been quite
well, sorry, like with that last story in mind, like all I could think was, here we go again. And
Yeah.
it's like you're attracting, you're like, it was such rubbish timing. So I actually remember distinctly, I was in a coffee shop around the corner from my own house, I'd say February 2020. And like I was spreadsheeted out the wazoo for this business. I was like, this is I'm so well planned. I know exactly what's going to happen. And then rumblings of COVID happened, and I remember just ripping through my spreadsheet, changing every assumption I made, and seeing like, look, if the music stops here for a while, how are you set? Like thankfully I'd had about 6 or 8, 9 months of kind of at it, so I'd a little bit of business under the bonnet, not much. But I was fundamentally scared because like I've always been a kind of sit down and have coffee with people and meet people, go to events, just activity, and stripping that back from, let's say, my business development armory, I was going, well, what else is there left to do? So, but again, I think it was one of those blessings. I think number one, went strongly down the kind of online systems, everything cloud based, everything, using DocuSign or what have you, or paperless. And so those kind of early days of creating that architecture has stood to us today. That it's and we still use much of the same systems as was would have set up back then. And then the second piece of that was I went deep on digital marketing and went on how what kind of strategies work without having to put much money into ads or whatever, which I didn't. I had no budget to put into ads, so came up with our own digital strategy, which was largely kind of LinkedIn based. And then when that sort of after that stage of paralysis, kind of maybe September 2020 or August 2020, just the inquiries started to come in, and my thoughts were, hang on, lads, we might be all right. We might be okay here. And, that ended up being a big inflection point and the kind of start of, I think, where our little business is today.
So yeah, perhaps it was a blessing in disguise.
100%, Peter. Yeah. I think it is. Sorry, for me, it was. I appreciate it was a tough time for everyone, but I don't know where our business would be now if we hadn't been forced to make some changes or try a few new tricks.
Yeah. And I wonder, has that fed into your philosophy? Because I know I've seen online you say we don't predict the future, right? We're not trying to predict outcomes. We're trying to prepare for all of them. Is that something that's come from, facing these hard times and these black swan events coming up? And especially in finance, we see it happen all the time. Has that shaped your philosophy?
Yeah, 100%. I think like that whole preparation, not prediction, is around that. Is that, look, there's things are going to pan out not the way we planned. There will be stuff that is beyond your control. But how can we best? And when we sit down, we do our financial plans with our clients. It's how can we best insulate your own finances from what's happening on TV and what's happening on your smartphone. And I think that's so key, because obviously there's so much information and data and scaremongery is being just fed to us, and it's so easily accessible that I think it's harder to be an investor now than ever before. To be a regular investor who has another job outside of finance or whatever, I think it's very, very difficult. So, we'll always talk about the downside. I'll probably always refer to 2008 in our financial plans. This is what would happen if there's a 2008 to these investments or to your pension or something like that, because I think inherently anchored by it, and not in a bad way, but it's always just not being too complacent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously now, well, I say now, pretty much every point in time is uncertain to some degree, whether it's a war going on somewhere in the world or, the economy, trade. What would you say to the individuals that are that say that wouldn't invest their money because it's too uncertain, they're too scared, they're trying to maybe time the market? What would you say to those people?
That's firstly a very rational thought.
Yeah.
If you take, the recent war on Iran, you're kind of like, why would anyone want to invest right now with that sort of in the backdrop? Why not wait till the clouds pass, and then when it feels a bit more comfortable, invest, and that's a very rational. That makes sense. It makes sense in every other walk of life except for investing, because there's never an ideal time to start. There's always reasons to not invest. There's a few great graphs available that show almost, let's say 20 or 30 years of stock market growth and the negative headlines that have appeared along the way. And there's always a reason to say not a good time. I mean, ultimately, what I would counter, or chat to our clients and go, like, being perfectly honest, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, whilst they may be fully aware of a war or, a backdrop of a irrational leader, should we say, to put it politely, they're still making money. And that's ultimately who you're backing when you're investing in the stock market. You're backing quality CEOs who are running quality companies to earn profits. And sometimes those profits might be less than we think and the market will fall. That's going to happen, but that's part of the journey. And I think it's so important. I mean, like, without getting too dark and magically capitalist about war, the stock market was up pre-war to post-war in the 40s and 30s. The stock market was up 11.5% per annum throughout the whole period, and that's it's not something that's trumpeted. And obviously, there's a horrible human side to all of this. But in terms of my pension or my investment, I think it's about how long you can invest with, and that's what we always start with, which is, no one ever asks this question, and it really annoys me. Is this sort of when are you going to need this money? And if I talk to someone in their 40s about their pension, and they're kind of going, oh, I don't want to really take risks. It's like, well, when can you access this money? And at the very least, it's 50, more than likely mid 60s, and probably in most cases 70s. So that's 30 years of investment in some cases. That's an extraordinarily long time horizon. There's going to be 5 to 10 more conflicts and wars between retirement and drawing down that. So really, it's how long. Whereas you flip the other side of that being, well, look, and we get this a bit, is we've money for a house deposit. We don't know when we're going to buy it. It's probably going to be over the next 2 or 3 years. That money shouldn't be anywhere near stock markets or stock market based investment. That should be kept somewhere boring. Granted, you're not going to make much money on it, but you shouldn't. There is no, in my view, there's no magic investment for sort of 0 to 3 years. You can mitigate inflation a little bit by getting something from a bank, but I don't think there is anything. So if you're able to put things in the right timeline and the right pot related to that timeline and the right investment related to that timeline, there shouldn't be any problems. And thankfully, philosophy's largely worked thus far.
And with investment horizon in mind, is there a time when you should start thinking about your retirement, or when you should start planning for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, like, I had a chat with someone who's approaching his 60th birthday just earlier today, and for the last maybe 2 or 3 years, he has said, I think when I'm 60, I'm going to start taking some of my private pension. So we've been gradually maybe decreasing a portion of the risk on the pension heading into retirement. So obviously it depends on each case, and I suppose the thing that I'm trying to demystify for clients is, someone like that, the instinct is to go all into cash or all into kind of low risk assets, but a portion of that 60-year-old's pension will still be invested for the next 25 years. So there still needs to be an element of risk there to mitigate inflation and the fact that that person's going to be taking an income from the pension as well. So, yeah, I mean, like I think part of a good financial planning relationship is either sitting down every year, um, or failing that, it's when life changes for good or for bad. You know, whether that be I've got a new job, or I've inherited some money, or you know, we got a bad health diagnosis or something like that. That all should be a chat to a financial planner saying, you know, how we need to alter our course, because the financial plan you make is only valid until the information changes.
Mm. And financial plans. So this is something I think growing up, we talk to our friends and they discuss it as if this is only for my parent, my grandparent. Does everybody need a financial plan, or when should you start thinking about, getting your finances in order?
It's a good question. I think in Ireland, it's twofold. I think everyone should have a savings habit, and that's a portion of money going out of your bank account every month around the same time as you're paid. You know, a direct debit type of approach whereby, you know, it leaves your bank account, it gets invested. I think everyone should have that. That's a sort of catch all. Then I think the real financial planning starts. I think for our job and our firm starts when someone after has bought their house and has a bit more line of sight in their future. And what I mean by that is they probably have a couple of young kids. They may be or close to being in their kind of forever career, so to speak. And I think that's the real tipping point. And the reason why the house thing is such it's not us being snobbish about, yeah, we don't deal with homeowners. It's more that just buying a house in this country is such a mission,
Yeah.
for countless reasons. But firstly, it just requires a lot of financial energy, and it requires, you know, a lot of planning. So it's hard to plan around that when that's happening. So what we'd always say, if someone has that in mind, I'd say, look, get the house, put all your energy into the house, put the wrecking ball through your finances that normally entails, and then when the dust has settled and you've gone to IKEA for the last time, you know, then I think it's time to come have a chat and start rebuilding your finances. So I do think everyone should be saving. And by saving, I mean into something private and into a pension. I think they're the kind of habits to have. And you know, with that, it's not like, I do think everyone should be doing some sort of boring saving. What I mean by that is into some sort of stock market broad based fund, whether that be an ETF or a managed fund. And you know, if people want to do something a bit extravagant after that, you know, be my guest. It's totally fine. We're not going to stop in the way. We're not going to get in the way, as long as you're doing the boring thing with us. Go off and do your crypto or whatever is kind of interesting at the moment. And that's not me down in crypto. I've no view either way. But you know, it's about getting your the right proportion of your wealth or your savings into something like that.
Yeah. And just on that, actually, that kind of triggers a question that comes to mind. Is there any kind of asset class or, you know, type of investment that you would actually say to someone, steer clear of, don't go near that? Or yeah.
I'd answer that twofold. So there's a lot of asset classes we won't advise on. So
Mhm.
we've very much set ourselves up as the boring plan B. So like, if you have something good, if you have stock options, or you want to do property deals or something like that, then go do that, but make sure it's the right portion, like I said, and we'll set you up with the boring bits. The you know, your kids' future, your kids' education fund, you know, your core savings account for your family. So we very much focus on that. We've kind of a pretty tight philosophy on what that looks like. In short, has to be pretty transparent, has to be pretty liquid insofar as you can change course when you want. We won't do anything. We won't do any deals. And what I mean by that is that we're never going to put a brochure in front of a client saying, look, you know, there's a fabulous commercial property here that we think we should all jump in for. That's just not what we do. So we very much concentrate on the boring liquid stuff. And you know, if you want to do anything else that's more racy, that's great. Go and do it. You can make a lot of money doing those things, but we're not going to stake our reputation on the kind of, let's say, sexier stuff.
Mm. And I see with so often when I talk to, you've seen talks with different wealth managers, asset managers, and they talk about this risk profile. And people, I think, a lot of the time can be a pretty poor judge of what their risk profile actually is. So I might think I want to be 100% invested in equities, but actually I might be able to sleep at night then if I seen the war happening. How do you deal with that in your company with clients? So a client comes to you and they tell you, I want to be all invested in stock ETF. I want to be in the S&P 500. But how do you measure the risk?
Well, there are a few industry tools that are kind of we're obliged to use,
Yeah.
and we do obviously because there's the compliance aspect. But I think the key thing is again chopping things into different timelines. And as I said, it's the 44-year-old who has X amount of years to retirement and says, "Look, I don't, I'm a medium risk investor." It requires a bit of conversation, Peter, that you have to explain why 100% equity portfolio is more appropriate for his pension than or her pension than bringing bonds or something into it. So like there's a large part of this is education, and like we spend money on our client education. We make sure that we have good tools to explain these concepts. Because that's kind of part of it. Because like if you're ever asked, are you low, medium, or high risk? Very few people will say high risk. Everyone's going to default to the middle. It's the sort of ABC thing. Everyone goes to B, and as a result, it doesn't need that kind of education piece. So, look, ultimately, and have had it before where people go, look, I appreciate that. I know what you're saying, but I'd still prefer to be in the medium bucket.
And you have people, I assume, coming from all walks of life, different ages, and different personalities. Are there any common mistakes that you see people make maybe before they have a chat with you?
To be fair, I would say financial literacy is a lot better than it was 15 years ago. So, there is I had this notion that I'd have to kind of rob clients from other advisors to sort of succeed in the business. I'd say 95% of our clients are unadvised before we have the chats with them. I think it's earning good money isn't enough. And if there's one thing I would see from maybe kind of my parents' generation is just because you've earned good money over a period of time doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be okay come retirement or anything else. I think it's not that some of these people aren't poor by conventional standards, but they should have more they should have more assets to show for themselves come retirement. So I think that's the biggest kind of errors I see is just not having sustainable habits tipping away in the background. Simple things like you get a pay rise and your lifestyle increases. You go on better holidays or, you spend more. And whilst I actually advocate for a certain amount of that, is that, and we do talk to high earners about this, is like, by all means, buy a ridiculous bike for your triathlons, but only with half of your bonus or something like that. It's 50%, and you need something because you need a cape and a crown from a good bonus as well. I don't think it's you can't be just saving, but I think not having sustained habits over time for high earners is probably the biggest mistake I would see being made. Like you could get really nitty gritty and say that people shouldn't have invested in these funds and that funds, but look, we're all easily led, and there can be some bad actors around. So, but I feel that the quality of financial advice in this country is definitely increased a lot, especially over the last 10 or 15 years.
Interesting. And just on the country piece, so we've actually brought up, we've happened to bring up Dean Disposal twice on this podcast. One with David Jelly, who's the founder of Property Bridges, and then two with Pierce Dargan, who's a counsellor. And obviously, there's been a huge uptick in interest recently. Finance Minister Simon Harris has begun talking about it. What's your opinion on Ireland in terms of the policies that are in place that allow people to actually generate wealth, and what do you think will change there, if anything?
Well, it's It's a funny one, and I think we've always, as a country, spoken out of both sides of our mouths relating to funds and the taxation of funds. Because whilst we are a great haven and place for a fund to domicile, all in most kosher way, insofar as we've great infrastructure, great fund managers and funds that like to live in Ireland because for multiple reasons. So we encourage that on one hand, but on the other hand, I think historically speaking, or certainly the last 15 years, the taxation on funds has been quite poor, as I think you both sort of alluded to. I don't think it encourages people to take risk. I mean, in short, before the budget last October, if I made a profit of 100 grand on a fund investment, the government revenue are entitled to 41% of that. So 41 grand goes across to the government for the risk that I took. I invested my capital. I took the risk that could go down, and I have to hand over a good chunk of the profits. So that strikes me as a bit unfair. To be fair, they've brought that down to 38%. Look, I'm not making predictions on government policy on funds, but I do think the direction of travel is very positive there, and I think certainly that should be more in line with capital gains tax. And that's not my opinion. There's been papers the Department of Finance have produced on that as well. It obviously can't happen in one fell swoop because it affects government takings. So I think that will happen, and then deemed disposal is just kills compound interest. And that is you have to, every 8 years, whether you take the money out or not, you have to pay that fund exit tax. So I think that'll have to change. And I think the recent figures of how much is on deposit in the country are absurd. And that was like, I think it was like 59 billion when I sort of started off exploring self-employment, and I think it's 179 billion. So look, I think clever things can be done there, and to be fair, I'd be first to criticise, but there's a lot of positive chat at the moment, more so than I've ever seen before.
Yeah, no, it is a real shame that that's currently, having such a big effect, especially on that compounding effect we see over the long term. But like you said, it does seem to be at least starting to make good traction towards, maybe where it should be in line. And also, like you said, on the financial literacy piece, it seems like there's been an uptick in that across Ireland the last 10, 15 years. People are getting more financially literate, and the taboo kind of seems to be lifting a little bit. Have you seen that yourself in work, that the taboo around investing and talking about money, and we have a bit more of a culture now embedded?
Yeah, I think so, Peter. And what I would say as well is that I think a large part of that is that when you say, look, this is a fund that has stocks and shares on it, a certain generation will hark back to the Celtic Tiger bubble bursting, and will think that a stock portfolio is Bank of Ireland, AIB, and Permanent TSB. That was considered a conservative investment in 2004 and 5. Now, again, we can look back and go, that's ridiculous, but at the time it wasn't, and that was the environment. So I think a lot of people are now switching over to, we mean global equities, and the Amazons and the Coca-Colas of the world, that these are large companies that aren't going anywhere, and they have a materially different risk profile to a small Irish bank, a small bank in a small island in a small country. So I think there's definitely risk appetite, I think, is increasing, and I think hopefully I think if you look at any other jurisdiction, they have good incentives for people to save outside of the bank. If you look at the UK, they've got ISAs, junior ISAs, similar things in Australia and the US. So I'd like to see some of those type of vehicles come into play into Ireland. Now, look, turkeys are voting for Christmas here because obviously it'd be very good for business too. But I think outside of that, even if I left the business tomorrow, I think it would be a very good thing for Irish savers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's moving in the right direction, and then the access to information amongst the common retail investors is much easier there. But I just want to mention, so the other day I listened to yourself on a podcast. It was Connor Carney's podcast. And this was, I think it was back in 2020 where you're about a year into Sparks Wealth. And it was so interesting hearing your perspective or where you were at there or at that time compared to now from what we can see. I think you've recently expanded into a new office. You now have 22 staff, is it?
Yeah, we've team about 22, which will be probably about 25 by the next quarter.
Excellent. So like there's quite a difference there, and a positive difference at that. And my question to you is, what would you attribute most of that success to?
Jeepers. That's like firstly when I think of myself at 20, I hate hearing myself even anyway 1 year in the past. I'm kind of like, what utter nonsense did I come out with then? There was no, like, genuinely there was no great plan insofar as, in 10 years time we're going to be this. It was always just like, and I think in 2020 was like, get to a stage where I've replaced the salary that was coming in from the job I left. And then once that kind of was achieved, it was sort of, well, look, we've got a few good things here now. Why don't we push them on? I'm talking about good systems and I think a nice format for financial plans. So I was like, well, if there was another advisor in here, they could benefit from all these resources as well. And that's kind of how it happened. It was just sort of every year, if I can build another profit center to do with the business, whether that be an advisor or acquire a smaller business, if I can just do one or two clever things every year, on top of doing maybe one not so clever thing, the thing should move forward, and year on year we should be doing pretty well. So I would say, like, invested heavily in staff across 23 and 24. And I think only now are we the other side of that investment. And now I think we've an excellent team that, perfectly honest, don't need much supervision, pretty much very well-driven people that are, well, we were all previously remote, now a chunk of us are in town, but that was always the basis that, like, there can't be no trust issues. If someone's behind a laptop 200 or 300 miles away, you have to be comfortable that they're working hard and doing what's right for the business. And so I think I've been quite lucky in hiring. Managed to find some exceptionally brilliant people, and I think now the kind of thing is, like, it kind of moves by itself. I would say is that clever people are doing clever things all the time, which makes us better, and that leads to business growth. And hopefully, I'd like to think then on the client side, we've had good outcomes over 7 years. Clients that are with us for that period have seen the fruits of building in those habits that we would have started 7 years ago, and looking at sort of university funds that are now fully stocked and give them great options in life, give their kids great options in life. So I don't know, just I try not to look too far down the tracks and try to just do, if we can do one or two clever things every year that makes the business a bit better the following year, well, then great. And I wouldn't set any 5-year goals or anything like that, to be honest. It's just kind of let's see out the year and do one or two clever things and see where we are.
Well, it's a bit like investing in that way, isn't it? It's the small baby steps and continuous.
100%. Like, I probably, going back to previous questions, like, I think I underestimated just how much hard work it is. You read, like, I've read, and that you fantasize about being self-employed, and you read all these great books, like I loved Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, and, like, that was kind of like, oh, I went to this meeting and whoop, there we made this managed to happen. And what you kind of forget, that there's a hell of a lot of work in between each clever thing, is that there's a lot of just showing up, a lot of getting in early, a lot of meetings, a lot of reps that just, it isn't glamorous, but it has to be done. So I think, like, yeah, if I was to look back at 7 years, it's been a lot of hard work and a lot of long hours, but I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Absolutely. One last question before we go. You've mentioned a book there, but we have a couple investing books. Maybe Peter might know a little bit more.
So We have a couple of investment books here: Intelligent Investor, Peter Lynch, Ben Graham, Warren Buffett, all of these guys who've inspired me and myself and Aaron throughout the years. Has there been any, maybe outside of Shoe Dog and Phil Knight, has there been anyone who's had a certain influence on you or a particular book?
Yeah, so I've a huge investment idol in Guy Spear. So Guy Spear wrote a incredibly brilliant book called Education of Value Investor, which I recommend to anyone. Even like, I thought when you hear about investment book, you're like, oh, it's going to be formulas and this kind of stuff. But Guy just tells a great story of his story, to founding his own fund, and the Aquamarine Fund, and just Guy has really strong values, and it didn't, maybe the penny dropped whilst reading Guy's book that you can try to have good values and be a good investor or be good at business, and they don't have to be separate, if that makes sense, that they all interweave into each other. So I was on this, a slight tangent again, but I was on Guy's mailing list. And on my last day working for my previous company, I got an email from Guy's assistant, Chantel, who said, look, Guy's going to be in Ireland next week. Would you like to meet him? I was like, absolutely. And I think, to be fair, looking in hindsight, I don't think it was, I think it was maybe they were looking for high rolling investors who might be subscribed. It's like this wiener who's just self-employed. I don't think I was on their hit list. So anyway, so I went along. I met Guy for tea for 3 hours in the K Club.
Wow.
On a Friday afternoon. He was so incredibly generous with his time, his advice, and was at such an interesting point in my life where I was about to obviously embark on this journey. And he subsequently invited me to his conference every year, ValueX, in Klosters in Switzerland, and I've been at it pretty much ever since. So yeah, Guy's great, and seeing him and the ecosystem he's created is a calendar highlight every year. Feel very privileged.
Wow.
Yeah, bet you wish you never asked that one.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I'm in awe.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. If people want to find out more about you, more about the company, where should they go?
Yeah, sparkswealth.ie, Peter, and I think, look, I try to be relatively active on LinkedIn with not being too annoying. So link in with me and we can chat.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Will.